Okay, welcome back to another episode of Retro Muscle. Today's video will be part 2 in the Peter Sisco and John Little interview by Muscle Media 2000. Here we go.
All right, you were saying.
Okay, well, at
Harvard University,
a guy named Goldman and his colleagues did some experiments with rats in terms of what is required for muscle hypertrophy. And while you can argue that it's rats, nevertheless, it does present an interesting experiment. And that was they took rats, they ran them on a treadmill, but they snipped the.
They were gym rats, weren't they?
They were gym rats. Okay, they cut the gastric. The tendon, so they couldn't activate that. So the levator ani muscle was the main thing that they were using, and the plantaris. So they cut food off from some rats, they castrated others, and so there's no testosterone. They took the pituitary glands out, the adrenals out, and took even deprived them of water in some instances, but they ran them all. They exercised them all. And what happened was, because these other muscles were cut, the workload became high intensity to the muscles that remained. And all of those muscles grew bigger as a result of the exercise, even in the absence of insulin and growth hormone and testosterone and even food. So it does show you the nature of growth is training is the primary requisite, and these other factors, while they are needed to induce optimum levels of growth, because you need the calories for and the nutrients for muscles to grow optimally.
But John, you must
grow in the absence of them.
John, you must agree there's been I don't know how many hundreds of studies about protein needs, and at best it's an extremely volatile issue. I mean, there's been studies that say that you need 400% of the RDA, or else you can't maintain a positive nitrogen balance and things like that. So there are studies, just as for every study you can quote, there are other ones that.
But here's the other thing, though, too, is that, I mean, even barring all the academics, and when you look at the state nutritionist today, where everything is carefully measured out, and you've got to have this, and you've got to have some of that. I mean, go back to guys like to Grimmick, Reeves, Schwarzenegger, Oliva. These guys weren't taking amino acids. Sergio used to eat pizza and drink Coke. That was the physique the guy built.
Right.
It wasn't nutrition that built that. It was the stimulation in the gym.
Okay, well, since you touched on it, what do you think of amino acid pills?
I don't think much. I mean, they're just the nitrogen constituents of protein, essentially. There's been some, again, anything in and of themselves isn't going to be a magic tonic. It's as you recall, a few years back, the FDA shut down some protein manufacturers because they're making outlandish claims of saying that they were the same effect as steroids. Well, having lost that market, which was very lucrative, they realized the only way they could get back into it was if they could kind of, do that old thing of putting old wine in new skins. So they gave them a new name. It was amino acids, and they have granted it. The science of nutrition has evolved considerably since then. But the fact still remains that whether or not aminos are free form or they act a little quicker than eating a steak, nevertheless, muscle growth isn't going to be enhanced at any rapid rate simply by ingesting amino acids. You've got to stimulate the muscle and then stay out of the gym and let the growth manifest. And it's true that if you have an optimum diet, whether you take supplements or not, the conditions are going to be more conducive to growing muscle. It's the degree of difference between a guy who just eats 3 meals a day and a guy that's just loaded with the right amount of nutrients is probably not all that great in the final analysis.
Okay.
TC, there is something that we could say here that would be heartening to the people who are primarily concerned with the nutrition. The power factor number allows you to measure other things as well, extra days off and getting more rest and things like that. But it also allows you to measure the effect of a particular supplement. So a person would have the ability to take a particular supplement before a workout and then see if he's able, under those conditions, to generate more muscular output. And to be candid, there have been people who have written to us and said, hey, you know what, I found out that this particular supplement helped me in that regard. So even if that was a placebo benefit that the guy was getting, he took the supplement, he believed he was going to do better, and then he went in there and he did. So what? If you're getting your muscles to generate more output by taking a particular supplement, whether it works efficaciously or whether it works through a placebo effect, in effect, it doesn't matter. If you are able to do something that gets you a greater muscular output, by all means do it.
Okay.
And in that regard, people have written to us and said that a particular supplement did help their numbers.
Okay. Let me point out to you guys and the listeners that periodically I play devil's advocate. I don't want to come off sounding like a twit, but
periodically. Cut us a little slack.
Okay. But once in a while I ask a question, even though I don't full the answer. I just doing it for the purposes of this tape. All right. All right. Why don't I throw some more traditional bodybuilding beliefs at you guys, and you see what you give me your gut responses to them. Instinctive training.
I think that's a joke. I mean, what's it mean? Somewhere deep down in our, the innermost recesses of our psyches, we possess a training instinct to go into a gym and lift weights and put, baby oil and pose in front of mirrors. And I mean, it's ludicrous. I mean, our instincts, if there are such things in human beings, are geared towards survival, not toward bodybuilding. So, an instinctive principle of training is. It's a misnomer.
And why trust your instincts if there's a more precise indicator?
Yeah, right.
You wouldn't trust. A sprinter doesn't, or say a miler. He doesn't trust his instincts when he's running a mile. He's got the watch around his neck and he's measuring.
He knows exactly what he did.
And he doesn't say, yeah, I think I shaved a couple seconds off today. I feel good. That felt better. I did a little something different with my stride today. That felt a little better. I think that's the way to go. I think it helps if I, turn my shoulders this way when I do a particular. Why would you? Why would you try and find some instinctive way? Use some technology.
Okay.
Put a watch on it, and let's quantify things.
Sounds good.
Also, the thing too. That also brings up the subject of perceived output and actual output. If you're doing a full range bench press, as an example, since we've used the bench press repeatedly here, you can fail on your 8th rep and be completely fatigued, and you're going to feel that that's the most you can possibly do. And you'll put that weight down, you'll have a good pump in your chest, and you'll be tired, and you might even be sore the next day. But, did you move more weight in a unit of time? That's the key. You perceive that you did, but, in actuality, it may have been a very unproductive workout.
We've probably all done that thing where you start out with a low weight, and then you keep going up and up in the weight until you get to a level that's, pretty close to fatigue, and then you start lowering the weight all the way down, doing consecutive sets with lower and lower weights. And in the end, you're doing a bench press with 20 pounds, and it's all you can do to squeeze out any repetitions. What does that tell you instinctively? Hey, that was really productive. I'm just beat. I can't lift 20 pounds off my chest. Wow, I just thoroughly exhausted those muscles. Well, add up the numbers and put the clock on it and see what the pounds per minute output is, and you're going to be shocked because it's very low. Mm-hmm. Going to failure with those tiny little weights is a waste of time.
Yeah, I understand that in biology, babies possess what they call a sucking reflex because they get milk from their mother that way. But I'm not sure at what age the bodybuilding instinct is developed in individuals.
Okay, very good. All right. How about you need to work the muscle from different angles?
Yeah, well, angle training, there's just the problem with angle training is that it's predicated on a misconception that if you take an inefficient exercise and you do enough of them, you'll hit the whole muscle group. Let's use chest again because this is a pretty popular and common analogy. You've got inclines for your upper pecs, you have flat bench or for your mid pec, and then decline presses for your lower pec. Well, okay, let's assume that does that. Let's grant these angle training advocates that premise, that if you train a certain angle, you're going to isolate a specific region of your pec. Well, the question is, why would you do that? If you can see, and the MRI studies will back this up, there are some exercises that will kind of stress certain areas. But when you look at that, you'll also find one exercise which is going to hit the bulk of the fibers there. So why wouldn't you gravitate toward that? Your objective as a bodybuilder should be to maximize fiber involvement, not diminish it. So, when you do 3 inefficient exercises, in lieu of one efficient one, even just by virtue of the time expended, it's an inefficient way of training. And remember that fibers are recruited in an orderly process solely on force requirements, how heavy the weight is you're moving. if you're doing 3 different exercises and the weights are full range, which means it's going to be weak range training, not what you're capable of lifting, your fiber involvement is just going to be moderate at best. Whereas on the other hand, if you take the heaviest possible weight you can do in your strongest range and take it to a point of failure, believe me, every fiber in your chest that's available is going to be recruited to move that big, heavy weight that you've got at the end of your arms.
And back to the physics analogy, it's that engine once again. You know, the great amount of work in a unit of time. If you're lifting more weight in a unit of time, it's your muscles that are doing it. There's nothing else coming into play there. You know, your pancreas isn't helping lift that weight. It's just the muscles. So if you can find an exercise where you lift a greater amount of work in a unit of time, that's an exercise to gravitate towards.
Yeah,
the recent MRI studies, the magnetic resonance imaging studies, have gotten a lot of ink, and they're valid. And they point out that certain exercise, you know, isolate certain areas of a muscle. But you know, to our view, that just tells you, great, I'll stay away from that exercise. You know, it's demonstrating. Look at it this way. You know, a particular exercise is letting 2/3 of the muscle lie dormant. Oh, is it? Well, I'm going to stay away from that one then.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that there is some evidence that some perceived, like if you're sore in your upper pec the next day because you did inclines, you think, hey, you know, that must be where it hit. But there is some evidence now that the different pain locations merely signal the fact that mechanical stress in the respective areas was too great, and that micro traumas occurred just slightly, you know. And I believe the chemical that is spilled out at that point is called hydroxyproline. That's where you're perceiving the pain. There's a little bit of pain due to that chemical being released into the system, but that doesn't mean that you've stimulated growth. It just means there's been a little micro trauma in that area.
And the trauma may be in an area that's not related to where the muscle experienced the fatigue. Much the same as when you have a heart attack, you feel a pain in your left arm. Mm-hmm. You know, your heart muscle's in trouble, but you got the pain in your left arm.
Okay, all right. To get a good workout, you need to get a good pump.
Hey, well, you got us on that one. Well, I mean, a pump essentially is just a swelling of tissue. You can get a great pump in your quads just by riding your bike down the street and getting off it at a fair clip, but that doesn't mean you've stimulated any growth. A pump typically is performed with a light weight for a lot of reps. And again, when you clamp that power factor on it, you realize that your actual muscular output is quite low, which means your growth stimulation is quite low. A pump means nothing. If you drop to the floor and do 20 push-ups, great pump, no muscle growth.
Yeah, it means nothing conclusive. It doesn't mean, in essence, it doesn't mean that you exceeded your muscular output from your last workout. It doesn't mean you engaged in progressive resistance. You know, I can do some push-ups right now and get a pretty good pump, and it's going to be nothing compared to the muscular output that I generate when I'm crawling into that power rack and doing those strong range partials on the bench press.
Yeah, and let me tell you the difference. This is a wonderful analogy because having trained, you know, both ways, I can tell you the difference. A pump it's almost like a sponge. If you pour water into it, it soaks it up and it gets big. But you know, the next morning, all the water's drained out of it. It's back to its normal size. That's what a pump does. Now, what we've found with power factor training is that you get a pump. There's no question about it. But the real benchmark that you've done something of major physiologic significance is the deep tissue fatigue you feel. Not the pump and the swelling, but the drain feeling in the muscle. And then later on that night, you develop a ravenous appetite. I mean, you could eat anything. And it's because the body is just, there's some major changes going on there. And I mean, we've had people. Probably the most dramatic example was that we had an MD in North Carolina who put on 34 pounds in 5 weeks, and his body fat stayed the same, and his diet was, get this, 2,500 calories a day. You know, so where, again, that harkens back to nutrition. Where was the calories required for that kind of muscle growth?
Now, was it how many pounds in 5 weeks?
34 pounds.
34. Now, I'm going to have trouble swallowing that one. That's a lot.
We would have too, except for the fact that we saw his numbers and have spoken. He's a physician, you know, and it's his best. We're not paying him. I mean, it's not in his best interest to say, "Hey, guys, this is wonderful."
He's written to us on a number of occasions, and we've spoken to him on a number of occasions. And this guy is nobody's fool. He was going into his work, which was an emergency room, after workouts, and drawing blood, and you know, doing an analysis of the blood gases to find out whether or not he'd stimulated changes in his metabolism. And you know, he quoted us all of the scientific findings that he had, and he was just very complimentary, and said that the power factor training generated greater metabolic changes as he measured them than any other system he'd ever used, and that he put on all this muscle. And he's the kayaker, isn't he?
Yeah, he's the guy. Apparently he couldn't even kayak the year before because of shoulder problems. And he'd done full-range training, and that had just exacerbated the condition. But the strongest range training evidently didn't put any stress or shear forces on the joints. They healed up, and he just cut back on his training volume, which probably in and of itself contributed to the weight gain because he didn't overtrain. But that's just some of the things that are happening with that, and it harkens back to the analogy of sunlight. I mean, muscle tissue. When you grow, when it grows bigger, that's an adaptive response to the stress of exercise. Much like a suntan is an adaptive response to the stress of ultraviolet light. And if you go out into the sun in January to get a suntan, you can be out there for 6-7 hours and see very little in the way of a tan, simply because the intensity of the sun's rays is so low. But if you go out in July or August, you don't have to be out there that long, and the response is immediate because the sun's directly overhead, the rays are more intense, and your tanning, your melanin stimulation is instantaneous. Well, the same thing with weight training. If you were to excise muscle tissue, take it into a lab, stimulate it, and it would grow bigger, and it would keep doing that as long as you keep providing the stimulation. And providing the stimulation was of sufficient intensity. And intensity, by our definition, is an increased work of output in a unit of time. And that's the thing with power factor training, is that every workout is an increased amount of work in a unit of time. So it's stimulating growth. You get out of the gym. You don't do anything else that's going to make inroads in your recovery ability, so the growth manifests, and then you hit it again, and it grows again.
You see, those workouts is something that we should put a little sharper point on. From our point of view, no two workouts should ever be the same. These typical workout plans is, you do 4 sets of 8 reps, and you do that for 3 months or something like that, and then you progress up to something else. In our view, no two workouts should ever be the same, because if every workout is productive, when you come back into the gym the next day, you're a different man. You're stronger. So doing that same workout is not going to provide any benefit to you. So each workout sort of gets pre-engineered to surpass what the last workout was. Now, so then you think, oh yeah, sure, and I got to work harder and harder and harder, and I'm just going to hit that wall, and how long can you keep that up? Well, the point is, the perceived intensity won't be going up at all because you're stronger. So when you're stronger, you can do a little harder workout, but it doesn't feel any harder because you're stronger. That's why I can lift so much more than a 10-year-old kid. I'm stronger.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So their workout has to be different than mine.
Something just occurred to me. Does power factor training make any provisions for guys who want to lose fat or improve cardiovascular health? Does that aspect exist to it? Or?
No, we really don't. We make no bones about it. Power factor training is strength training. Pure and simple.
Okay.
That's what it's for. It's for generating the maximum amount of strength increase you can in the minimum amount of time. Pure and simple. And listen, the book's been written on things like cardiovascular fitness. It's cross-country skiing. It's jogging. It's those repetitive things. Yeah, low intensity. That's the jury is in on cardiovascular training.
Okay.
And likewise with flexibility training. Which is something that comes up with us sometimes on the subject of the short range. Hey, I'm going to lose my flexibility, which we could get into if we want. It's a long subject. But let me say this. When John and I talk to martial artists, they don't even bring up flexibility, because when they go into the gym to strength train, they're not thinking about flexibility because they know that you keep those separate. There's no martial arts masters that think that to develop flexibility, you pick up a 300-pound barbell and start doing flexibility exercises. They don't do it, and neither do yoga masters. There's 3 separate components there, and if you don't keep them separate, you're going to have mixed results. You're going to compromise both of them. If you try and do flexibility training along with your strength training, or aerobic training along with your strength training, there's going to be a compromise. If you want to do aerobic training with barbells, you're going to have to cut the intensity way back. You can't keep up peak intensity for, an hour and a half.
Yeah, plus body fat levels are primarily contingent on diet anyway. I mean, that's input-output. So.
Okay. Hey, well, this has been great. I think many of the listeners would like to know where they can get in touch with you guys.
Yeah, well, we hope they do. We sell the Power Factor Training Manual and the logbook bundled together because you need both of them. So if the manual and logbook together sell for $49, there's a shipping and handling charge of $3.95, and if you live in California, the sales tax is $4.04. You can order by writing to us at Power Factor Training Systems, P.O. Box 920954, Sylmar, which is spelled Sylmar, California 91392.
Okay, great.
If you have a credit card, I should say, if you have a Visa or MasterCard, you can just call the order line, which is an 800 number, 376-6117.
Great. And let me just add to listeners, there's a lot more to this book and their tapes than we've scratched here. So
can't cover it all in one interview.
Right. So I just wanted to add that. But
yeah, we do have audio lecture tapes and everything else.
Yeah, we've got a few other products too.
Terrific. Well, listen, guys, thank you for your time and have great luck with your program.
Thanks a lot, TC.
All right, we'll see you then.
All right, you take care now.
Bye-bye.
At Muscle Media 2000, we're always glad to hear from you. Write to Muscle Media 2000 at Box 277, Golden, Colorado, 80402-0277. Or call our customer service department in Golden, Colorado at 1-800-615-8500.
Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed the interview. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and if you want more bodybuilding content, check out my Instagram page at Retro Muscle Mags.